Winter is coming, and so too are significant changes for Inter Miami. At least that's what the plan is right now. Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of Miami Total Football Radio, aka Miami Total Futbol Radio. I am 1/3 of your hosting team, or co-hosting team. My name is Franco Panizo. Joining me today on the number one podcast on all things Inter Miami, providing you all the latest news, analysis, opinions, updates, insight, and much more, are none other than Jose Armando and Steve El Primo Brenner. Steve, let's start with you. How are you doing today on this fine Wednesday evening?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Looking forward to the holiday week. I'm going to be in California, which is going to be a nice change of scenery, even though it could be freezing cold. But there you go. I'm used to that Floridian weather. But yeah, kind of a bit of an. I think we're going to have a bit of a lull now in terms of club activity. We're going to touch on it. We spoke to Chris Henderson yesterday, and now we just have to let him and Phil get on with their jobs of basically restructuring a roster with little to play with in terms of the sanctions and stuff like that. So yeah, it was an interesting press conference, but maybe not as interesting as we thought it would be.
Jose, how are you doing today on this Wednesday? We will touch on, of course, that press conference. That's what this podcast will be about, touching on yesterday's end of season availability with Sporting Director and Chief Soccer Officer Chris Henderson. But Jose, PS5, Jose, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. Happy to talk to you guys again. I missed the last podcast of the regular season, the last one.
Yeah.
But I'm here. And I'm happy to be here and happy that we had an opportunity to talk to Chris, which we didn't. I don't think that happened last year, so that's good. Although we'll have our opinions on that. It wasn't what we expected, but listen. At least we had the opportunity this time around.
It was progress in that regard. I think speaking to some players, or even Jorge Mas as well. That would have been also a plus for us, just to get a bit more context and a bit more answers to what the longer term vision is. Chris Henderson obviously did speak to us for half an hour and gave us some insight, but he did keep things a bit close to the vest in terms of specific details. But again, we'll touch on all of that during this week's pod. I also want to hear Jose's thoughts and his opinions on the Rodolfo Pizarro Gonzalo Higuain, I don't know if you want to call it a feud, or the exchanges that were had on social media, because obviously, like you said, you weren't on last week's pod, so we didn't get a chance to talk to you about it. Very interested to hear your thoughts. We'll get to that later on in the show as well.
I can make a bizarre revelation that I am currently playing Football Manager 2022, and I am scouting Rodolfo Pizarro at the moment as manager of Ajax, looking potentially at buying him. So just tell you that.
That's shocking. Why would you, Steve El Primo Brenner, after ripping him all season, go for Rodolfo Pizarro in Football Manager?
Maybe I can mold him into the player I believe he can be.
But okay, there's a player in there somewhere, right? That's your famous.
Absolutely.
That's your famous line.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's just jump right into it, guys, because there's a few topics to talk about during this press conference. So let's get to it. Okay, guys, well, before we jump into the press conference, before we jump into the comments that Chris Henderson made with regards to the plans for the off-season, let's just quickly touch on Monday morning's news, and that was the initial roster decisions that were made by Inter Miami. 10 players had their contract options declined for 2022, and they were Sami Khedira, Kelvin Leerdam, Victor Ulloa, John McCarthy, Jay Chapman, Ventura Alvarado, George Acosta, Josh Penn, Dylan Castañeda, and Patrick Segrist. So not any huge surprises, but I do think there were minor surprises in that Sami Khedira and George Acosta, two players that played for Fort Lauderdale CF, that had local ties. One's from Boca Raton, the other one's from I think Miami, but I believe he lives in Pembroke Pines now, something along those lines. So they both had local ties, so that was a bit surprising to see them cut the cord there. Obviously, in the press release, it said that the team is still in conversations with some players about potentially returning, but I don't expect that the two of them will be back. What were your thoughts just overall on the roster decisions? Jose, I will start with you.
Well, in terms of players that were not offered a new contract, I think, there's only maybe two of them that I would think that negotiations will keep on going in terms of trying to get them back. And of course, Victor Ulloa, he was he was important for the team early on, but plenty of injuries towards the end. Jay Chapman as well. He was part of the team. He was basically the backup for plays early on, but then at times he was the starter. So those two players, I maybe they deserve another shot. In terms of players that, I think the tricky list here is the players that are staying and that are under contract, and that's maybe where we can guide a little bit the fans listening, because that doesn't necessarily mean that they will stay with the team.
Sure.
If you look at the list, you find names like Nico Figal, Juli Carranza, González Pires. Those are names that might leave the team even though they do have a contract. Those are the key players for Inter Miami in the rebuilding that's going to start in just a few weeks or days, maybe. Who knows? So it's an interesting list, and with everything going on with Inter Miami in the offseason, I think it's important for people to understand exactly what is happening right now. And as we move on in the pod, and I hope people will be able to follow along, because everything is tied here. This list will be tied to what Chris Henderson said and what the plans are. This is a pod that is going to be very important, and that people can come back and listen to just have an idea of what the team is doing when you see announcements and when you see players coming in or coming out.
Steve, what did you think of the overall decision made for those 10 players? Did anything stand out to you? Did anything surprise you? Again, for me, the local ties, the players with local ties being let go, not having their options picked up was surprising, especially since both are pretty much on close to, if not at league minimum in terms of how much they can make with their salary. So anything stand out to you, or was this just business as usual for you?
Yeah, I mean, Victor Ulloa was an impressive. He played pretty well, didn't he, in the first half of the season before he got injured. So that was a little bit surprising. I guess he would have been a better earner. And yeah, I guess ultimately they just thought that guys like Jay Chapman just weren't good enough. They think they could bring in players that are better. I think it's a little bit harsh. He seemed to be okay to me. Never looked like an amazing player, but solid enough, and definitely MLS quality. But we don't see him day in, day out. In training and around the locker room and everything like that. So, as Phil Neville said, and someone at the club described to me that the decisions and the meetings they had were brutal. It was very, very difficult. They've been with these guys for all season, and they depended on them, and then they've got to make the decision of whether or not they're going to have a future at the club. And yeah, brutal was the word that was given to me. And it's harsh decisions, but it has to be made in this predicament they're in, particularly with the with the sanctions. They've got to make tough decisions in order just to make sure they can spread enough money around to make sure that next season isn't a repeat of this one. So it's tough on some, but it's just unfortunately just the way it goes.
Steve, who do you think are the players that they might be in conversations? Unless I don't know if you've heard anything, but if not, who do you think the players are that Inter Miami could be considering bringing back, that are in conversations to bring them back? Jose has said he thinks it's Victor Ulloa and Jay Chapman. I don't think Jay Chapman is one of them, because he's already made his goodbye post on social media saying, thank you for the time at the club, and being one of the first players to be able to dress the jersey or wear the jersey. So I don't think he's coming back. If there's a chance that him coming back, I don't think he makes that post on social media saying goodbye. So I don't think Jay Chapman. I agree with Jose that Victor Ulloa could be one of those guys that could come back. I think Breck Shea, who is out of contract, he did not have his option picked up or declined because he's just out of contract in general. He's a free agent, so I think they might be in conversations to bring him back as well, but that's just my opinion. That's not inside information. What do you think, Steve? Who do you think they might be in talks with to bring back?
I don't have any inside information on that particular point, but what I will say is that we're in November now. The next season doesn't start till early March, so the transfer window is open now, isn't it? So they can be in discussions with these players at least for the next 3 or 4 months. So I think what you will see now is that Phil Neville and Chris Henderson are weighing up their options. They've decided players that they don't particularly want to keep for now, and they'll try and pursue different options and weigh up everything they've got. And then if they have a potential to go back to one of these players at a later date, probably in the new year, then they will. But, they've been working on this. We've known about the sanctions for 2 months, 3 months now. So they've already been working. That's Chris Henderson's job is to get everything in place. And so they're just trying to fit all the pieces into the jigsaw, into the Inter Miami jigsaw. But yeah,
they have time in the general sense, but I don't think there's going to take that many months to decide which of these players comes back, if any at all. That they're
but they keep their options open.
Sure, but it's not going to be a 3-4 month. It's not going to be a 3-4 month process. They'll make that decision within the next few weeks. Hey, either you're going to come back, or you're going to move on and go somewhere else to a different team, or go through the MLS reentry draft, etc., whatever mechanism you fall under MLS's very complex roster mechanisms. But this was surprising to me. This one was surprising to me, is that Ryan Shawcross is on a guaranteed deal, so he's automatically still on the roster for next season. Whether he returns or not after recovering from injury, that remains to be seen. But right now, officially speaking, he is still on the roster. I'm a bit surprised that Ryan Shawcross was signed to a guaranteed deal that did not come with an option like these other players did, because he was coming off a lengthy spell of inactivity, had been dealing with injuries prior to joining Inter Miami. He even said he was considering retirement at one point. So the fact that he has a guaranteed deal going into next year, I'm a bit surprised that someone of his injury history and age and risk was given a guaranteed deal. Did that surprise either one of you, Jose? Did that surprise you at all that Ryan Shawcross did not have an option that the team could decline?
Well, I would like to say that I was surprised about it, but the way that Inter Miami is hiring players and the process that they have been going through, I mean, it shouldn't be as surprising, right? I mean, Jairo Quinteros is in the list, by the way.
Yes, he is. He is.
So I mean, I'm not that surprised. I should be, but I'm not that surprised. I still think, they're going to find a way to get rid of him. So if we're thinking about Jay Chapman, Victor Ulloa, Break Shea, those are players, well, for me at least, Break Shea. I know you want Break Shea back, but for me, if you want to go young, I don't think Break Shea might fill in that list. But I think they're going to end up finding a way to get rid of him. I don't know how they're going to do it, whether they're going to come to an agreement with him, whether he feels that he's fit enough to play under one more season. Remember, he was talking about retiring before joining Inter Miami. I don't know if that's something that he might be thinking of. So to answer the question, no, I am not surprised, because that's the Inter Miami way. So I would be surprised if Jairo Quinteros ever comes to South Florida. That would surprise me more.
Ryan Shawcross is on a base salary, according to the MLS Players Association, of $300,000. So he could earn $300,000 more next year if he sticks it out for one more season. I don't know how many years his deal is worth, but he
has 1 year. He has 1 year left on his deal.
Okay, so there's Steve and Primo Brenner with the details, with the facts. So
but you are an MLS aficionado more than I am. But is it correct that a club can only buy out one contract per season or per preseason or whatever? Is that correct?
That is correct. They did that with Matias Pellegrini this year. They used the one buyout option on him, although he was still on the books, and we won't get into all of that because it gets complex.
So does that mean are they then keeping their options open, or they've already committed to that one buyout? Because then obviously that would explain why they're going to keep him. And
as far as we know, or as far as I know, I don't know if you guys have heard anything, but as far as we know right now, they haven't used their buyout option for next year. They obviously used theirs for 2021 on Pellegrini. Now as for 2022, they haven't used that one yet, but I doubt they use it on Ryan Shawcross. If you're going to buy somebody out, I imagine you'd want to buy out one of the DPs where you have more of you can get more of a return. So
Just to explain to everyone, you can only buy out one contract effectively per calendar
per
year,
year.
correct?
Correct.
Pretty much.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Per
they're not
MLS
going to risk that on Ryan Shawcross. He's on a good wage. He's got a back injury right now. He doesn't want to give up earning another $300,000 a year, living in Miami, living a great life in a lovely temperature, rather than go back to Stoke. So you can understand from the player's point of view why he sits there and thinks, you know what, I'm going to sit this out. I could be okay. The management aren't that sure about it, but what do? They don't waste the buyout on him. They hope potentially that, thinking, yeah, it's maybe not great. It wasn't a great deal for us, but there is a hope that he could return and contribute next season. So that's the dilemmas just that clubs and managers like, and Chris Henderson, those guys that they're dealing with right now.
I do think there's a chance he comes back next year and is on Inter Miami next year because
100%. He can come back and could be fit as a fiddle and be brilliant.
Well,
but
I mean, that you can look at it that way, but I mean, given his injury history, his age, but I just think with the salary, if he's on a guaranteed deal, he could easily just be like, well, I want that $300,000 next year, so I'm not retiring, or I'm not calling it quits.
Was it a good signing in the first place? In retrospect, probably not. I had people telling me that they just thought that it was a very, very bad move for Inter Miami, and Shawcross potentially thought MLS was going to be easier than he thought, but looking at his past record, it was worth a gamble. Maybe the gamble sometimes.
Yeah, but the gamble should have came with an option deal, in my opinion. I don't think they should have given him a guaranteed deal through 2 seasons, given the fact that he's injury prone, given the fact that he's had such a spell of inactivity. And
that's a slightly different conversation when you're looking into the actual proper details of the contract. But
the only way
he was fit at the time. So what do you do?
Was he fit at the time?
Well, he was fit at the time. Yeah.
He was barely playing.
He was barely playing.
He
didn't come to the club with injury. He was coming back off an injury, but he didn't come to the club with injury. So, yeah. I mean, what do? You offered a player that's been a great Premier League player or a great player in English football, which is of a higher standard in MLS. Yeah, of course you're going to take it.
Steve sticking up for the Englishman. Who would have thought? Look, man. I don't see any scenario where signing Ryan Shawcross at that point in his career on a guaranteed deal was a good idea. I just don't agree with that. Like, I just don't see.
Maybe the numbers don't add up, but the potential of having a
sure.
Player
but you sign him to a deal that gives you an option. Now, the fact if he would only come off on guaranteed years, then whoever made that decision probably made a bad decision, because Ryan Shawcross at this point in his career, with what we know of him and in the recent past, nothing was really indicating, all right, he's going to come to MLS and really turn it around and kick butt.
But he's had a good career, though.
He's had a good career. So has Gonzalo Higuain. That doesn't mean that they're going to come here and light the world on fire just because of what they've shown at earlier stages in their careers. But anyway, look, the only other alternative for him to go would be if he and the team together collectively decide, let's part ways. If they mutually agree to terminate the contract, he could be moved off the roster. But he would have to agree to that. And then that wouldn't count as a buyout because they both are mutually agreeing to rip up the contract.
He's cancelled his contract.
Well, I mean, you see it occasionally in MLS.
Well, why would you do that, though?
Some players want to go home. Some players don't. Some players don't.
He's had a good career. He's not short of. I'm sure he's not short of money. I haven't looked at Ryan Shawcross's bank balance in a while, but it's a lifestyle thing as well. I interviewed him earlier in the season. He loved the sort of the lifestyle in Miami. The guy lived in Stoke for 10 years. I love England. If you've ever been to Stoke is not like Fort Lauderdale or anywhere in Florida. Stoke is It's cold. It's wet. It's not that glamorous. Not to say that Fort Lauderdale's glamorous, but
whoa! Fort Lauderdale's pretty glamorous, brother. Weren't you out by the boats earlier this year? Weren't you like hanging out on the boats and talking to some Inter Miami fan on the boat? I forgot you. I remember you telling me the story back in like May or so.
Mate, I'm starting to compare Fort Lauderdale with Stoke. I need to stop right now. But if he's got 1 year left, the player will definitely want to stay, and you can't blame the player.
Oh, I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. Jose wanted to say something. Jose, what were you going to say there?
I think there are 2 things that go along this topic as well. The first thing is, Okay, yeah, that's a good amount of money, but is it worth it if you're constantly injured and you're going through rehab and just the grind of another season, a long season in MLS with all the travel? That's the one thing that you have to consider if it's worth it. Because Ryan Shawcross, he's not maybe one of the top, and he hasn't earned as much money as the top names in the game, but I'm sure he's doing fine. And the other thing is, and this is a question for you guys, um, do you think you might? Is there any other team that would be interested in Ryan Shawcross? Because I have doubts. I have doubts about that. But could that be an outlet for Inter Miami? Maybe finding a deal somewhere, a team that might need him, that he might agree to go to, which is another part of a contract that we might have to look into. But is there a chance for somebody else to say, "I want Ryan Shawcross"?
In
Yeah,
theory, yes.
possibly.
In theory, yes. But more realistically speaking, I don't think anyone's trading for a 34-year-old English center back
Exactly.
coming off another injury, and it's on 300,000. This is a young league, as Chris Henderson said on Tuesday. So I just don't see anyone trading practically anything for Ryan Shawcross, and that's just the stage or the state of MLS this day and age. Which again, for me, makes the decision to sign Ryan Shawcross to a 2-year deal that much more perplexing and baffling, because again, he was coming off of a lengthy spell of inactivity to the point where he was considering retirement. Anyway, I think we've stuck on Ryan Shawcross quite a bit here. Steve, I think you have one last thing you want to say there on the topic, and then we'll switch gears to the press conference from Chris Henderson.
I think we should talk about Ryan Shawcross the whole time. I mean, it's a very multifaceted subject. Which, look, I think like a lower league English side potentially would come into him if he's fit, but he's earning good wages here and enjoying a lifestyle which I don't think he'd be able to replicate in England. So for the player, why would he want to leave?
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
It just boils down to, was it a bad decision to bring him in the first place? But that's a kind of a different situation, a different conversation. So, but again, they have to, they've just got to deal with what they've got. And if they get him fit, I think he can be helpful, but he's not fit and he has a problem. So there you go.
They essentially got rid of Andres Reyes, young, talented Colombian player, and replaced him with Ryan Shawcross this offseason.
Your friend.
Hey,
Andres
I'd take Andres Reyes
my old
any
amigo.
day of the week. Yeah, you're old. I would take Andres Reyes any day of the week than Ryan Shawcross at this point in their careers. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't know if it was a Phil Neville assignment or if this was a David Beckham handpicked player, because obviously he has that Manchester United experience, but it was definitely
known for playing in Man United. Though. He's mainly known for playing.
But he has the Manchester United ties, and that's definitely not an insignificant factor in how he ended up here. So anyway, moving on to the press conference, moving on to Chris Henderson. What was the biggest takeaway you guys had from Tuesday's conversation with him? It was about half an hour long at Drive Pink Stadium. Again, not a whole lot said in terms of specific details, but in general terms, you could pick up some nuggets here and there. What did you think? We'll start with you, Jose. What was your biggest takeaway from the press conference on Tuesday?
Listen, I will tell you that I think the biggest thing that fans can take out and anybody else can take out is that the team is going to go young next year. They're going to have a lot of young players.
Right.
But the one thing that I kept thinking about after the press conference was over was the way that Chris Henderson was trying to sell Rodolfo Pizarro. And I don't know if you guys caught on this, because he was saying that he deserved the spot in the national team and great player and all that.
He should be in the next camp. That you watch these last two games and you question how he could not be in the roster, which I could get the argument for that, but when he's not really been playing consistently for Inter Miami, I think the answer is there, right? The answer's there of why he didn't get called up. But I mean, Chris Henderson knows that.
That's a sell, right?
Right.
It's
a sales pitch. It's a sales pitch.
Yeah, you're
public sales pitch.
Yeah, so that's the one thing, like I said before, I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to him, but I think maybe this offseason, with so many moving parts, it's hard for Chris to be as open as we would have wanted
Right.
in a press conference, because there's a lot of moving parts, and those are the two things, going young with maybe some lone players, and the other thing that caught my attention was when he was asked about Pizarro, the way he was selling Pizarro, which tells me that
Right.
and I think we all know this, right? They are actively looking for a place for Rodolfo Pizarro, which it's understandable because of the situation of the sanctions, and Pizarro being the only player out of the DPS that actually will generate some interest from I don't know if in MLS, but maybe outside of the league in Liga MX. Although somebody told me just a few days ago, what would you think about Pizarro going to within MLS to some other team where there's a bigger Mexican population,
Yeah.
or maybe another Mexican teammate that he can, gel a lot better than what he did with Gonzalo Higuain. So that remains an opportunity for him. But the reality is that for me, Rodolfo Pizarro, it was a sales pitch that what we saw from Chris Henderson the other day.
No, I absolutely agree. He talked about how Pizarro can unlock a defense, but obviously we didn't see a whole lot of that this year for various reasons. But yeah, I think he was a bit complimentary of Pizarro, as he was with most of the players. I asked him about all three DPs and the outlook he had, or just his review of their seasons, and he wasn't very critical of any of the three of them. And I think, again, like you said, it's a matter of keeping cards close to the vest, trying to maximize whatever chances are of getting rid of these players, or parting ways with them via a trade, via retirement, whatever it is. I think Chris Henderson was being very, very complimentary rather than very open and honest about things. But that's just my perspective.
If I can add one more thing, Franco, that I think it's worth noting, is that just a few weeks ago, before the end of the regular season, I remember asking Phil about the three designated players, and he gave exactly the same answer when he was asked. Chris Henderson gave the exact same
Right.
answer, because they are all under contract.
Right.
So, of course, we know that they're trying to move some of the players. So I'm guessing that it gives you an idea that that's the thought process when they were going to be asked to. They already knew what they wanted to answer. So that's just an example of how the press conference went. They had a plan, and I think they did execute the plan the way they wanted. We're just going to have to wait and see what the moves are in the next few weeks.
Steve, for you, what was the biggest takeaway? I agree with Jose that the biggest talking point, in my opinion, was the continued statement of going younger, of wanting to be a bit younger. Chris Henderson talked about how it's a young league, and how, take the New England Revolution, for example, with their athleticism and their speed and their counterattacking, that is, this is a league where you need to be able to move around the field, etc., etc. So I think that is the biggest takeaway. But what was your observation? What was your analysis of the 30 minutes that we had with Chris Henderson on Tuesday?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've known Jose that all for the whole season, that if someone came up to them tomorrow and said, we want to buy your DPs, will you sell them? Of course they would. I mean, 100%. They've not been happy with all three of them. And Chris Henderson's quote to us yesterday: all three DPs are under contract, but we're listening to all options to help us improve the team. So that, they're open to any possibility. When you're reporting on things like this, when it gets to this point of the season now where the transfer window's open, sometimes the names don't come forward as much as possible. 6 months ago, sources were telling us different names, and now it's gone a little bit quiet because they know that this is the crunch time when they have to try and make these contacts. So yeah, I mean it's been the same situation the whole way through. The DPs have all been for sale. Pretty much, I think all three of them are going to stay. Interesting, really, what he did say about Pizarro. He was bigging him up, yeah, because they want to sell. If they could sell him, they would. But it's just whether or not there'd be any takers. Mexico had a bad result, didn't they, last night in the snow? There's huge pressure on the national team right now. Is he going to even get back in? He's not hasn't been in the picture, is he, the last few games? So there's all that swilling around. He's not a very sellable asset, unfortunately. But he kept on talking about youth. I think potentially they'll try and use most of the allocation money on one established player who can come into the team straight away, and the rest of it's going to be, younger players. But that's what they said initially when they started the franchise. They wanted young players to come through to be the heartbeat of the team, local players. And fine, they have let some guys go, but maybe they weren't good enough. So maybe now they're looking at different players. Chris Henderson also keeps talking about how good Phil Neville as a coach was, how good he was working with youngsters. That all contributes. They're trying to produce good players, and who's to say that they won't produce players that can be solid MLS players while paying the big money for sort of overseas stars.
Quick question for both of you: Why do you think that why do you think Chris Henderson was being so cautious with his words with regards to the DPs? And obviously, yes, they are under contract, but why do you think that is? Why do you think he was being maybe more complimentary? Because again, when I asked him about an overview of how they performed this season, he was very positive, just highlighted what they did well as opposed to what they didn't do. Do you think it's a matter of they know that there is a possibility those players might be back in 2022? Or do you think it's just something else? Jose, I'll start with you quickly.
Yeah, I think, it's because they don't know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, if you think about it, the team will really benefit from not having Blaze back. But if he's under contract and he wants to play, then we're going back to the Ryan Shocker situation.
Right.
Who's going to buy? Seriously, who's going to buy Blaise Matuidi?
Nobody. No one's coming in and buying Blaise Matuidi.
Wage, absolutely no one. So that's why they start. Yeah.
So if they find a way to get him somewhere else, then fine. They're they're gonna be cheering, but that's the situation with the 3 DPs. They were there was an expectation from all of them, but it was different at a time because they came into the team at a different time. And of course, Pizarro being the first one coming in and the way things are shaping out, it's not a good situation for the team, but for now they do have a contract and you kind of have to go out there and that's what you have to say. They are under contract and they will be back as of right now. If the season started tomorrow, they will be in the roster. But there's so many moving parts. I think that's the key phrase here. If things can change, if they get an offer, I do believe that, especially in Liga MX, I do believe that they still believe in Pizarro, that he has a potential somewhere, like as Steve would say. But
Jose, would that be a big story if Pizarro went back to Liga MX? Would it resonate in the whole of Mexico, or just people would just sort of see it and think, oh, that's interesting?
It would be a big story because remember before Pizarro coming in here, there was talk about him going to the Premier League or top leagues, right? But of course, things are not even close to what they wanted or expected. But the reality is that teams in Mexico believe in the Pizarro that played in Liga MX. They don't place too much value on what has happened here in Inter Miami. And agents can shape things up the way they want it. They can explain things that happened here, the pandemic. He didn't get along with his teammates. They didn't treat him well, but he has the potential. If he's able to come back, he'll be able to perform. We want to get him back to the national team. And so many things, so many conversations that for teams in Liga MX that might not be aware of what's going on here in South Florida, and then he'll grab attention. And especially if he goes back to Monterrey or Chivas, that's going to be a big deal with Pizarro going back. So
sure.
I think that there'll be some interest in, especially in Mexico. I don't see it here in MLS, but I do believe in Mexico. There might be a team or two that would be interested in listening. And of course, they do know the situation that Inter Miami is in, so that plays a factor as well.
Look, and I think one thing that we need to add in terms of that conversation is that if he goes back to Mexico, it's not only a big story in terms of Liga MX because one of their internationals or one player that's in the pool returns, and a player that has a decent name to him, but he would be essentially taking a step back, right? Because he left, like Jose said, Liga MX at a time when his stock was at its highest. There was talk of Europe. He obviously came to MLS. That took a lot of people by surprise, and he was criticized for that. Returning to Liga MX would obviously be seen as probably a step back for him after.
Would it? I don't think so. Would it? I mean,
I think so.
A Mexican midfielder going back to playing in home? I don't think so. No.
I think so. I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not.
No, I'm not being sarcastic. No, I mean, I'm just.
No, absolutely. I think it would be seen as a step back.
I'm putting myself in Jose's shoes of being like a Monterrey fan. Pizarro came back. I didn't see
is Jose a Monterrey fan? What?
He is now.
he isn't your fantasy manager. He's a Monterrey fan. Look, no, I think it's absolutely seen as a step back. It would be like an MLS player, a U.S. international that plays in MLS, going to Europe for a couple seasons and then returning back to MLS because things didn't go well in Europe. I think that would be seen as a step back. So I think that would be a big talking point if and when he does return.
I like it when players have different experiences and play in different leagues. I think you don't see that enough, really. But anyway, there you go.
And just to quickly add to Pizarro, he posted on his Instagram. You know, I've been on the Rodolfo Pizarro Instagram beat as of late, but he posted on his Instagram post him at the Miami Heat game, or a recent Miami Heat game, and he's wearing a blue and white jacket. And Hector Moreno, who is a fellow Mexican international, plays for Rayados de Monterrey. He said, well, he just put heart emojis. And Pizarro responds, Buenos colores, no tocayo, which means great colors, right, my friend or my namesake. So maybe Monterrey. Maybe Monterrey is a possibility.
Well, you know what, Jose? This is just the build-up for Franco to then tell us that Rodolfo Pizarro started like retweeting some of his tweets or something. Is that right?
No, we already touched on that last week. I do want to hear Jose's overall take on the matter, because I know when I sent you guys a screenshot in our WhatsApp group that we have. Yes, we do have a WhatsApp group for us three. Jose said this reminds me of high school or something along those lines, right, Jose?
Well, I think they're just playing games. Be careful, Franco, because at some point they're going to know you're looking at their timeline.
Oh, no. It already happened. See, I didn't want to get into the conversation of me because it's not about me, but since Steve brought it up, it already happened because, you know...
Yeah, Rodolfo's a fan. That's cool. And it's refreshing to see players being honest and doing what they think. But Franco loves it. And why not?
It started with some observations that I made of the season finale against the New England Revolution. Anyway, I screenshot a few of them and obviously shared that and tweeted out. And one of my buddies, who I know personally on Twitter, just teasing me, said in one of them, "You've gone from soccer reporter to telenovela journalist," something along those lines. And Pizarro liked that tweet. So
yeah, but that's good luck, fair play. That's
no, absolutely.
Good. Like
no.
Awesome.
I'm not angry at Pizarro for liking that tweet. It's all well and good. I'm not offended by at all. I'm just sharing because Jose was saying, be careful. He's going to end up liking something or saying something. So I mean, he already liked the tweet, Jose. So he already beat you to the punch there in that regard. But yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I think at some point, it's hard to understand exactly what's going on with tweets, retweets, likes. But I think, everything that happened in social media in the last few weeks, which I've been aware because of you, by the way, Franco.
Hey, man, I try to leave no stone unturned. That's all I'll say. I try to leave no stone unturned. I'm trying to have my pulse or my ear to the ground on everything.
I think it's interesting and, expected at the same time. The situation with him in Inter Miami hasn't been ideal. I think if you're able to like a tweet about it, that means you're getting closer to moving on. If you're really frustrated about it, you don't want to read about the subject. You don't want to do anything with it. So I think Pizarro's in a good place. He's a soccer player living the dream. So I think he's going to let things play out the way they do this offseason and see what happens next year. So I listen, the situation with him anyway, we already know what it is, and I don't think that's going to change. And that's about it.
I did ask Chris Henderson on Tuesday about their relationship and these tweets, and Chris Henderson said, or he chalked it up to just how competitive Pizarro is, and he comes from a winning environment, as do Higuain and Matuidi, and that when things haven't gone well, that that they expect to win, so that's why you see some unhappiness and some displeasure. So again, Chris Henderson was more of the, instead of maybe being critical, he was more just taking a more positive viewpoint on the matter, or at least expressing that publicly. But going back to just his press conference, we've talked about the DPs, we've talked about the youth movement that is expected to happen this offseason. Something else that I thought was noteworthy, there's a couple more things, but one of them was that the team may not play an attractive style next year, especially away from home. That it might be more of a counterattacking team or a gritty team. This is something we've heard Phil Neville say in recent weeks, and now we've heard from Chris Henderson. They've used the word grind it out, or the term grind it out, and grinding out results. Do you expect Inter Miami to change stylistically how it plays next year? Because everything's pointing that it will. That it might not be pretty. It might not be a free-flowing attacking style soccer, the type of soccer that was sold, at least publicly, in the media and to the fans over these first 2 seasons, that they wanted to be an attacking team, a proactive team. Do you think we might see an Inter Miami that's reactive in 2022, given what the two of the leadership positions, or 2 people in leadership positions, have said? Steve, what do you think?
Well, no, I mean, I think that shows that they know that it's going to be a young team. They're still going to have Higuain. They're probably going to still have, Matuidi, Morgan, Pizarro. We don't know, but they're going to have a young team. It's going to be inexperienced for the most part. You can imagine they're going to bring in potentially one other high earning kind of guy. Hopefully, they're guy like Mota that they mentioned, the Brazilian guy. The rest of it's going to be young players coming in, Harvey Neville, guys like that. So I think that's kind of them trying to just, buy some time. Look, it's not going to be pretty. We're going to try and get results, and the team are going to be focused on doing that. It's not going to be free flowing, amazing football that's going to make everyone cry out of the beauty of it, but they're going to try and get the job done. I think that just points to the fact they're just going to have an experienced team with, sprinkled with guys like Higuain and, Matuidi, if he can keep going, and, the guys. So it's, it's about the sanctions, isn't it? It's about the sanctions. They've been hit badly with it, and now they're having to deal with it.
Chris Henderson did say there are ways to minimize those sanctions and to deal with them.
But it still affects them, doesn't it?
No,
That's
absolutely,
fine. It's
absolutely.
corporate talk, but it still affects them big time, doesn't it? It hasn't helped them at all, is it?
No doubt,
So,
and that's why he said we will listen to all offers. So I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if they maybe trade some fan favorites this year or this. Sorry,
hold on. Let me just ask you: are they in the worst position of any other MLS team?
I mean, yeah, they're playing. Yeah. They're hamstrung significantly, and again, this is I was going to
more
say
than any other 30 other teams.
Not 30 other teams, not yet, but yes, they are in a very precarious situation because of the sanctions that they have, and I think because of that, you might see.
And just to be clear, the other front offices, agents, everyone knows that, so that it's
right. No, it hurts them even more.
Negotiations harder.
Absolutely, but this might be why we could see, and I've seen it in MLS over the course of my 10 plus years covering the league, there might be some fan favorites that get let go. That you might think right now, today, sitting here, if you're listening to us, no way someone like Lewis Morgan gets traded or is shipped off somewhere. I could absolutely see something like that happening this offseason because he has value. He has value in this league, and he's performed well. Somebody in this league, I mean, I imagine if you ask most teams around the league, who are the top players on Inter Miami that you'd be interested in taking, I imagine Lewis Morgan would be right up there, if not number one, just because of his age, his the production he has shown, especially when he's played more further up the field. So I could definitely see some fan favorites being moved. And again, Chris Henderson said they will listen to all offers. It seems like every player practically on this squad is available and up for grabs. No one is untouchable.
Of course, because they want to have that option. And if someone says to them, hypothetically, we want Lewis Morgan, that's it. We'll take him, and then they get that extra money for him, and they could do something else.
Absolutely.
That's it. It depends what fits in it. No one is indispensable. And like I said, if someone came up to them tomorrow and said, "We'll take all 3 DPs right now," they'd get rid of them in a heartbeat.
Oh, of course.
It obviously doesn't work like that. But it's no one. Coming into the 3rd season of the franchise, no one's indispensable. someone like Lewis Morgan would have attracted interest from everyone. You have to look at its domestic situation and see what's happening. Now the borders are open because of, previously they were closed. My parents, for example, can finally come, having left Miami for the last time just before what was supposed to be the first home game ever. The first game against LA Galaxy they had tickets for, then COVID hit, and that was that. So, that could obviously, alter decisions in terms of, foreign players or certainly players from the UK or whatever. But you just have to wait and see what happens. But I think, any option is possible right now. No one's indispensable.
And that is your Brenner family update. Jose,
they're on their way.
Jose, good. I'm glad you get to see your folks, Steve.
I'm not actually going to be in California. They're going to arrive while I'm actually away. But anyway, that's irrelevant.
But you will get to see them.
Well, I would when I come back.
Okay,
but they're going to be in the US while I'm in another while I'm on the West Coast. But it's fine.
Brenner's
and no one cares about this other than me. So
hey, I care. I'm glad you get to see your folks, even if it's not as long as you would like. Jose, switching to you here, what did you think about that? Because something else that Chris Henderson said in this press conference was that, and this is where he did provide some detail. He did go into some more specifics. One of the few times he did in this press conference is he said, in terms of this offseason, they want to try to improve the spine. Now, I am paraphrasing. He didn't say it exactly like this, but he did use the term the spine, and he named specifically by position. He said striker, midfielder, didn't say what kind of midfielder, but midfielder, and central defender. Those were the three positions he named. That's the spine of the team. So that is where we heard some specifics. He also went into a little more detail with regards to the midfield later on in the press conference, saying that they want to have players that are a bit better with the ball, that because if you have the ball more, right, you defend less, or you're defending with the ball because now you have the ball, you can move it around. You're not defending off the ball. So looks like the midfield and obviously the other areas that I just mentioned are going to be their priorities.
He did say that he wanted players that complement each other, which that's proven to be something important, especially when you're talking about your DP players.
Right.
I do believe the goal for next year, is maybe not to have. It's just about having better results than what they did this year. I think everybody at some point is going to understand the limitations that they're going through. Of course, there's going to be a group of fans that will look at the transactions and they will freak out. They will be like, "Oh, this is not what they offered," and we wanted a world-class team with world-class players, and maybe they don't understand exactly what's going on. But I do believe at some point everybody's going to be on the same page, and at the end of 2022, I think we're going to be looking at a team that was looking for you just having an opportunity to develop players, to show some that some of the young talent could be in a few years the backbone of the team. I think if they end up losing less games than what they did this year, they would call it a success. In MLS, you never know. You get a win or two at the right time, and then maybe you try to sneak in the playoffs, and that would be like winning the championship for Inter Miami next year.
I do think that the main priority on top of getting young, is to bolster that midfield, be it with another attacking midfielder, a better attacking midfielder than maybe, or a more productive attacking midfielder than Rodolfo Pizarro, and a central midfielder that can give you more than what Blaise Matuidi can give you, because obviously we've all been critical of Blaise Matuidi this year. He hasn't been that impressive. He's had actually a lot of bad games, in my opinion, so I definitely think that is, if getting younger is point A or point 1A, then point 1B is bolstering that midfield, because that's the one area, that's the one part of the team that Chris Henderson went into a bit more detail on, started talking a bit more soccer specific conversation. I don't know. He was just doing more soccer specific talking when it came to the central midfield. So I think they'll definitely look to improve that and address that. Obviously, like we know, Jean Mota has been linked. Rafael Veiga has been linked as well. He would not comment on them specifically when asked by, I believe it was a Brazilian journalist that was on the Zoom portion of the press conference, but clearly they're trying to bolster the middle of the park. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up this segment and jump into the Q&A? Anything at all? Steve, I think you have something.
I don't know if I do, to be honest, other than it's a cagey time that they've got feelers out. Agents are now sort of prowling. They know exactly which clubs have got which money and everything like that. Everyone's for sale. It just depends who comes in for them. But that's been the way the whole time, really.
Jose, anything else you want to add with regards to this press conference? Anything that stood out to you, or anything you want to touch on before we put a bow on the end of season availability?
No, I can't wait for the Q&A. I already saw some of the questions on Twitter, and I like them. So if you want to get going, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so then we'll leave it there. It looks like Inter Miami's having a sale yard this offseason. Everything is up for sale, so if you're an MLS team or a team across the world that has any interest in any Inter Miami player, well, put an offer in, because Inter Miami will be listening to them all. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back for the Q&A session. I think it'll be a pretty quick one, although it should be an interesting one. We'll do that after this. Okay, guys, it's Q&A time, and we've got a few questions. Let's just jump right into it. You know the drill. First one comes from Tank721. What will be the goal for next year's squad? Is it to make it to the playoffs or just end with a positive record? About how many goals and assists do you see Gonzalo getting now that Fede is gone and Pizarro will more than likely be gone as well? Okay, let's try to keep it short and tight. Jose, I will start with you. What will be the goal for Inter Miami's squad next year?
From the get-go, it's going to be about the playoffs. At least try to make it to the playoffs. And with that goes, obviously, a better record, a better performance overall. And, I think that's going to be the goal. And in terms of Gonzalo Higuain goals, I think it's too early right now. We still have to see how the roster shapes up, to see how effective he can be. If things are not going the right way, then I don't know. I hate to say it, but I don't think he's going to get to 12 goals. But, we're going to have to wait and see.
Right. Let's see what number 10 is brought in place of Pizarro. If Pizarro is moved on, before we start predicting Gonzalo Higuain's goals for 2022. We have to see who gets brought in that position, I think. I agree with you that I think the goal will be to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to come out and say, like they have for the last 2 years, we want to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, etc., etc. I think they will take a much more realistic approach with the sanctions and everything in terms of just being a team that makes the playoffs and taking it from there. Steve, what do you think are the goals for the squad in 2022?
The bare minimum, of course, is to get into the playoffs. I mean, it was an absolute failure that it didn't happen this season. That is the absolute bare minimum. They want to obviously finish as hard as possible to help them as the race to get to MLS Cup continues. So no, bare minimum, it was a complete failure to not finish in the top 8 of 14. Yeah, that's the aim. That's what they got to aim for.
Okay, next question comes from Don Cafecito, and he says, seems like for the first time since the team's inception, we have our sporting director and coach on the same page and with a clear plan moving forward. With this new youth movement, I see Phil staying another 2 seasons for this kind of project. Would you agree? I'm going to start on this one because my first question to Chris Henderson in the press conference, and we did not touch on it on the last segment. I think Steve briefly mentioned it, but we didn't dive into it in more detail, so I'm glad this question came up. I asked Chris Henderson, what's the reason that they're bringing Phil back? Like, I wanted to hear his reasoning. We all know that Phil Neville's coming back in 2022. The team obviously didn't have a great year this year. It finished worse in the standings than it did in 2020 under Diego Alonso. That's all well and good if they want to, stress continuity, but I wanted to hear from Chris Henderson the reasons for Phil Neville returning despite the failure that was 2021. And he said part of it was that he thinks he's a good coach and that he's good with young players, and given the situation they're in, they're going to have to tap into more of that youth in the pipeline and have to cultivate and develop prospects like an Edison Ascona, Aimé Mabika, continue to work with a Christian McCool and those type of players. So that's one of the reasons that they're bringing him back, and I fully agree. I fully agree with Don Cafecito here that I think Phil Neville's here for the next 2 seasons. I just don't see him getting let go based on everything that I've heard publicly, some of the things I've heard privately, and just obviously the very obvious connections that he has with David Beckham. I think he's here for the long haul. I don't think he's going anywhere. Even if results go poorly, again, next season they will be playing with a handicap of sorts because they won't be able to spend as much as other teams. So this speaks to me longer term project. This speaks to me Phil Neville will be here for at least another 2 seasons. But that's just my vantage point. Steve, we'll start with you here because I know we always have differing viewpoints when it comes to Phil Neville.
Well, what's a more reassuring duo, Paul McDonough and Diego Alonso, or Chris Henderson and Phil Neville? What position would you think? Well, maybe, yeah, I'll go with the Chris Henderson one rather than the Paul McDonough one. No, don't you think? Is that incorrect?
I mean, I've said that I would have taken Chris Henderson first. I've said that since earlier this year, last year. Yeah. I would have gone with Chris Henderson initially over Paul McDonough if I was making a decision. But that's not the question here, Steve. The question is, do you see Phil? Do you agree that Phil will stay here for another 2 seasons?
Absolutely.
To unfold this kind of project. So the results don't necessarily matter then, because if the plan is for him to help develop these young players, then the results aren't as much of a priority as they are in some other places.
No, that's not correct at all. No, he's had this season, but now he has a full preseason ahead of himself. Working out the roster, and now it's this season is crucial for him. If he doesn't deliver, then he of course he would expect that questions will be asked and decisions could be made or whatever. But remember the whole preseason of last season was a mess. So mitigating circumstances for sure. Yes, the sanctions, but no, he knows it's on him, and he knows that team is good enough to finish within the top 8 of that league, 100%. A couple more wins either way, and they probably would have done it this season, but it would have been sort of, hanging on by their fingernails, so to speak. But he knows that team should be doing much better. So it's on him next season. If he doesn't deliver, then I'm sure he would face up to the consequences.
So you don't agree that you see him staying on for the next 2 seasons to just unfold the project? You think it does matter?
No, I think next season's is definitely big for them because he tried this season hard and it didn't happen. But he was dealing with a lot of players that weren't particularly his own. Now they can sort of maneuver the squad a little bit more, even though he is hamstrung by the sanctions. I mean, if it goes badly again, then I'm sure he'll look at it. He's man enough to say, is it working? I don't know. I'm not sure, but.
You think if they don't make the playoffs next year that he gets let go?
Depends on what happens. I mean,
if they don't make the playoffs, do you?
They've got to make the play. Yeah,
if they don't though, but if no. But that's not. I'm asking you, if they don't make the playoffs, could you foresee a scenario where Inter Miami says, "All right, Phil, it's time to part ways"? Because I don't see it. Based on everything I've heard, I don't see that. I think Phil Neville's here for the next 2 years, regardless of what happens. It's a
question, but I'm sure if you sat down and asked him right now, of course I think he would agree with you. Yeah, for sure. He knows that.
But it's not up to him to make that decision. But it's not up to him to make that decision. I think we're having like a misunderstanding here, or you're not getting, or I'm not explaining myself properly here. Because again, if the results don't go their way next season, if they miss the playoffs again, do you see a scenario where the team says, "Phil, time to pack your bags. We're moving on"?
Maybe he would say that. Who knows? We don't know. He would definitely see it as a failure for 100%. Yeah.
But that's not the question. The question is, do you see the team parting ways with him? Would you see the team if they don't perform next year? Do you see a scenario where the team's like, "All right, Phil, we're starting
possibly,
fresh"? Yeah. Okay. I don't. But that's just me. Jose, what do you think?
Who knows?
I think I'll give, and I think the team will give Phil one more year. I think next year he's going to be here for good. But it's going to come down to the development of players as well. If you want to go young, you want to see progress, right? And
Yeah, and that's what Chris Henderson said. He's good working with young players. So, they like dovetail of each other. Yeah, you bring in the guys that are earning the big money, but you also produce the young players. That's what it's all about, isn't
Right,
it?
but
So,
if you're developing young players, then that doesn't necessarily translate to results right away. So developing young players and competing for MLS Cup are not necessarily synonymous with one another, right? Like they just don't necessarily go hand in hand.
But the players have been in the system for a couple of years, right? So, they're not starting from completely scratch. There are players in the system have been in their system for at least the last 2 years.
What if you have another Macoun situation in 2022? I mean, and if it's not only one player, maybe it's 2 players, 3 players that show progress, that could take you to the playoffs. Like, if Ascana comes in next year and he develops the way he's supposed to, if Macoun continues to grow, you'll still have Gonzalo Higuain around. If you have a better group that connects a lot better, the collective effort is better. You can make it to the playoffs even with having some young players. So I think it's next year. To me, for Phil, it's going to be very important next year. We want to see progress. You want to see the team learning from what happened this year. And if there's no development and the results are still bad, then I think we can all expect Inter Miami to struggle for the next 2 years.
Wait, Jose, sorry to interrupt you, but just to be clear on the question, if Inter Miami doesn't make the playoffs next year, if they struggle, do you see a scenario where Phil Neville gets let go, or do you think they would keep him on because they're banking on and planning on having him work with the youth? Do you see that and prioritizing that, or not prioritizing that, but stressing that? Do you see a scenario where even if they don't make the playoffs next year, this is a longer-term project, a larger-term vision and plan, he sticks around for 2023?
Yes, I can see a way in which they fire him, and I'll tell you why. Because they will have 2 more years with the sanctions. So if you let him go next year, then the new coach will come in the last year of the sanctions, and having a group of players, young players that will most likely come back for 2023, that would be a good start in a sense that once 2024 comes and you're back in the game, then you can bring the superstars that you want and just complement the group of players that have been with the club for the last 2 years. So that would be the right timing to bring another head coach. Not a lot of pressure in 2023 for a new head coach, if that's the case, because you're going to come in the same situation with the sanctions. So yeah, I can see it happening. If there's no playoffs and the situation with the young players is not good enough, yeah, I can see them making the change. Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, I don't agree with that, but I like the argument. I like the arguments you made there for that. So let's move on to the next question, and it comes from Lucho Lalo 1896. He says, "Get me those pink and black nets. LOL, just kidding. We need a better team. Why did they get rid of Acosta? Why do we still have Higuain and Pizarro? Especially with the last episode you talked about, they don't gel together. We need more South American flair to this team. They need scouts out there." So something else that Chris Henderson did touch on and provided detail on is that the scouts are traveling to look at players. He said he will be traveling to South America as well to look at some players. So they're definitely in the midst of doing all that. He also said there's processes in place now with different hires that they've made to help better assess players and potential signings. So that he said weren't there when they first arrived and tried to change things pretty short notice. So, as for the specific questions, why did they get rid of Acosta? Like I said before, I think it just is a case of these players maybe not fitting into the longer-term plan, the longer-term vision. Again, Acosta and Guediri were 2 players that were close to the league minimum in terms of their salaries, but if they don't fit into the longer-term vision of the team, then obviously they're going to part ways. I think something that's not an insignificant detail and something I haven't touched on here. He is not a homegrown player. Even though he's a local player, he didn't come into the academy and et cetera, so he does count against the cap. His 80,000, I think he was making around there, that does count against the cap. Whereas other homegrowns like an Edison Ascona, et cetera, on their homegrown deals, they don't count against the cap. So that's probably something that also was taken into consideration here, along with the fact that maybe they just don't rate him highly enough. But because of the fact that that hits their salary cap, because of that fact that it hits their budget, that's also probably something that went into consideration here. Because, like we know, they have sanctions they have to juggle and have to deal with and try to minimize. So they need as much money as they possibly can. And, if they are having to spend $80,000 on a player that they don't really see earning MLS minutes or they don't really rate for a longer term future, then obviously, again, you part ways with him. I think the question comes from a place of maybe not fully understanding the complex, understandably so, the complex MLS roster rules. You can't just get rid of Pizarro and Higuain. They have guaranteed deals in MLS, whereas some other players do not. Normally designated players, or I think all designated players, have guaranteed deals. So, you can't just get rid of them by MLS rules. So you have to, if they're going to get rid of them, they have to either buy them out, sell them, trade them, etc.
Sorry. What you said before about him saying that they've got those processes in place. That meant that when before Chris Henderson came in and Paul McDonough was there, obviously with Diego Alonso, have they wasted a year in terms of the scouting network and stuff like that? I'm not sure.
Well, that's what Chris Henderson led us to believe, right? That there are processes now that didn't exist when he arrived. So, from his vantage point, there are better processes now that are in place. So there are processes that exist now that didn't exist a year ago. And he also touched on the fact that they use stats, they use analytics, they use analytics through every step of the process. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going off the top of my head here, I believe he said they have a 7-step process in terms of their scouting or in terms of their player signing. I'm curious what the 7 steps are. I'd be No, absolutely. But I'd be thrilled to hear what their 7 steps are, like what those 7 steps are for them to come to terms on wanting to sign a player. That's just maybe the soccer nerd in me.
It depends on the coaches. It depends on the whole coaching staff. Obviously an interesting aside. If we're not going to touch on it, Miami-based, obviously Paul Dalglish leaving his role as Miami FC coach. Anthony Pulis, assistant manager Phil Neville, has been linked with the job among some others, and Paul Dalglish potentially may go to MLS, managing MLS, played in Houston, knows the American scene well. So, a little bit of movement in the Miami coaching circles, which, Frank, I'm sure you're very interested in.
Well, Dan, you didn't even give me credit for reporting that Paul Dalglish is in sights of an MLS team. Jose, anything you want to add to this question with regards to why they got rid of Acosta? I mean, I just pretty much, I think I gave a thorough answer with regards to Higuain and Pizarro still being on the books. We probably expect at least one of them to move, but obviously that still has to be figured out. But anything you want to add to this question?
Well, no, just the fact that George Acosta is not with the team. I think that's something that caught. I don't know if it's by surprise, because remember that George had an injury early on last year. I don't know if he was obviously able to recover, but I don't know to what extent that did affect him in trying to impress the coaching staff. But it's decisions. Coaching staff, they see this players every single day, and they know exactly what's going on. We barely got a chance to see George Acosta. And so, it's a matter of a young player struggling early on, and we'll see how he's able to move forward. 2
more questions, and the next one comes from Sal Paradise, and he says, I noticed Matias Pellegrini was not mentioned in the official roster under players with guaranteed contracts. Is that an oversight? I thought he was technically still under contract next year. Very good question. I had the same question myself when I saw the roster. Jose, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the situation with Pellegrini was pretty clear once he was not with the team, because early on Phil acknowledged the fact that he was not coming back. So at that point,
right, but he should still be listed under the players with guaranteed contracts officially, because he hasn't been sold. He's on a loan through the summer. Now, whether he comes back or not, that doesn't, officially he still should be on the books. But so I think we have to do some reporting on this one, because I don't think it's an oversight. I think it's just a matter of there's something there, some formality, some MLS rule that is probably complex and that we don't know about, or that might not be that much public knowledge, because he should have been listed from my understanding. He should be listed based on him having a guaranteed deal in MLS. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a formality. The the bottom line is that he's not coming back. He's not coming back, and at some point I was thinking during the season that whether the right decision was made with him. Although, I don't think there was plenty of options, but yeah, I think it's just a formality. Maybe obviously we're looking to it, but I think the situation with Pellegrini was pretty clear. It is not from the release standpoint, maybe because he was not listed, but situation is he's not coming back.
Yeah, well, I think we should look into it. I think we should look into why, because Jairo Quinteros, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast, was on the roster, right? He's named as a player that's officially on the roster, but Pellegrini is not, despite only being on loan. So I think there is some digging that we have to do into that. I think that might be interesting. We might turn up something pretty interesting. Steve, anything you want to add there?
No, that just gives me horrible flashbacks. I just don't want to go back to that time. We've got to move forward, man. Pellegrini, no, it's giving me the chills.
But he's still on loan, right? So if they don't sell him again, unless they have something worked out with Estudiantes de La Plata, if they already have an agreement that okay, after the loan, he's yours, for a price, or he's yours for free, etc., etc. That's why I said we should look into it.
We will look into it and we'll post it on our Twitter page, I'm sure.
Yeah, because if in the summer the loan expires, in theory he's then officially an Inter Miami player again, and then he'd be back on the books again. Sure. So if Inter Miami has 3 DPs and he's back on the books, he'd be a 4th DP. They break the rules and then they're in trouble again. So we do need to do some digging there.
No way, breaking the rules
with 6 DPs at one point. No.
Well, I don't think it'll get to the point where he comes back as a 4th DP. I don't think it's going to happen. But again, in theory, it could. So they have to figure out a long-term solution for him if they haven't already. If they have, they haven't told us publicly anyway. Last question, Don Cafecito, and this is a fun one for you guys. So I'll start with Steve, and his question is the second question of the week for him. Bonus Papayón question: what are your favorite pizza toppings, Steve?
Boring, really. Probably like mushrooms and onions.
Okay, vegetable guy. All right, Jose. What about you?
Well, I like Cuban pizza. By the way, have you guys tried Cuban pizza?
I don't know what Cuban pizza is.
Yeah, it's good. You should try it.
No, I don't know what it is. What is it?
Plenty of cheese. Just more cheese. Okay. Extra layers of cheese. That's
about Cuban cheese.
Yes.
I do like cheese, so that sounds interesting.
I'm not very complicated when it comes to pizza. I'll take ham, and that's about it. Very simple. Growing up in Honduras, that's what we always order, and that's what it is for me. Ham.
You guys are not exciting with your toppings. I like mushrooms. I like some pineapple. I like Hawaiian. I know people have the argument is does pineapple belong on pizza? I don't know what your stances are on that, but I absolutely think it does, and it can be on pizza. I do like a good Hawaiian with the pineapple and the ham. But I can also eat a supreme. I like a basic regular cheese. So I'm diverse. I don't really like chicken on the pizza. I mean, I can eat it, but I'm not a huge fan of chicken on pizza. If you have it, I'll be more than happy to eat it, but just not the biggest chicken on pizza type of guy. Do like Italian sauce. Again, I'm not that picky when it comes to pizza. I will eat almost any toppings. No anchovies though. Absolutely no anchovies and no black olives. Those are deal breakers for me. No anchovies and no black olives. That's just me.
What's wrong with black olives?
Just don't like them. Just don't like them.
I love black olives. I mean, me too. My daughter loves it.
Your daughter in the background is also a big fan of black olives. You've trained her well in the Brenner household. It's all uniform. Okay, well that does it for the Q&A session. Let's give our final thoughts. I do think we'll be back for one more pod before I head off to Europe for a bit of a break. We'll do that next week just to kind of not recap, but just to give our overall summaries of each player that performed for Inter Miami this year. I think we can have a little bit of fun with that and just do it in a much more light-hearted way. But anyway, final thoughts. Steve, you're up first. It might be on pizza again.
No, interesting just to speak with Chris Henderson and just see what the official line is coming out. But they're working on players, bringing them in, bringing them out. It'd be interesting to see how it all pans out, because like I say, they've got every option open, so you can trade and negotiate and whatever, but it's just whether or not they can work it out to their advantage with all the sanctions going on.
Jose, you're up now, and Steve did just touch on something interesting, but go ahead, Jose. What is your final thought?
Well, my final thought is on the homework that I'm gonna leave for all the listeners. Try to understand what's going on with the team. It's a little bit tricky. We'll try to guide you and help you, but there's a lot to learn when it comes to MLS and in the off season. So some of the moves, there's no way to go around them. You just have to go through. And at this point, this is the time where, maybe the excitement is not there around the team, but be patient, and we'll try to guide you. Of course, everything will be fine. This is just another MLS season. This is Inter Miami. We'll be here for a long time. But, it is what it is. The situation from the first year, it's going to be affecting this team not only this year, but maybe the following. And you just have to deal with it. At the end of the day, Inter Miami is responsible for the sanctions. They didn't follow the rules. And, this is for the good of the league. And hopefully they're able to move past this quickly enough, and you guys get to enjoy good soccer, a winning team, and have something to celebrate other than, saying goodbye to MLS legends like Fede, which, again, props for a great send-off. And, yeah, those are my thoughts, and we'll be back next week.
This is Chris Henderson's time to shine. Just to touch on both of your final thoughts. This is Chris Henderson's time to show that why he's one of the highly regarded MLS executives, because now it's his job to try to maneuver through the sanctions and try to fit it all together and make it all work. This is where, Phil Neville has to get the players to perform on the field, in the games and in practice. This is Chris Henderson's job now to maximize and try to really improve this squad. Because something else we didn't touch on was that he said he and Phil Neville don't feel like this roster has enough of their fingerprints on it, and they want to get more of their fingerprints on it, and they think that they will be able to do so starting with this upcoming transfer window. My final thought has nothing to do with Inter Miami. My final thought is on World Cup qualifying in South America. Arriba Peru. Peru just won back-to-back games, 6 points in this November window. They are in 5th place, which is the playoff spot in South America. They are in the fight after looking like they might not be there. It's going to be a tough race to the finish. There's 4 games left. They will be played in January and March, and those will make or break Peru's hopes. I really hope that they can get back there. Obviously, I'm of Peruvian descent. I have my Peruvian passport, so hopefully they can do it. It's been fun to watch them bounce back and bring back some joy in life. Peru's in the hunt. Peru's in the fight. Hopefully they can seal it with another trip to another World Cup. But we'll leave it there. And again, we will be back next week just to do one final pod before the year wraps up, because I'll be in Europe for a good bit. So don't think we'll be doing a pod for probably about a month or so. But we will be back next week. So for Jose Armando, for Steve and Alexa Brenner, I am Franco Panizo. This is Miami Total Football Radio. And we will talk to you guys again next week.